So this over here is the ASUS Z690 Strix D4 motherboard. Even if you're a creator, this is a very interesting motherboard, white themed and DDR4. So if you're building a PC that requires a white motherboard and perhaps you want to be a little bit more affordable with the DDR4, then this motherboard is very, very interesting, especially if you're a creator, because there's not a lot of motherboards out there that offer quite what this one does. So let's have a look at it.
Looking for a cheap way to license your Windows? Check out WhoKeys through the links in the video description. Make sure to use the code TN20 to get a 30% off. Paste the license to the activation settings and you're all done. This license is for Windows 10, but you can upgrade it to Windows 11 for free. They also offer Microsoft Office 19 license. Use the same code TN20 to get a 30% off. Check out WhoKeys.com in the video description below.
Now, I'm not sure if you've seen my video about this Gigabyte Z690 Aero G motherboard yet, because in there I said that this is the best creator motherboard for DDR4. And yes, that's true if you need the video output through USB-C, but if you need just the fastest ports and perhaps the best DDR4 motherboard, then this one over here is actually a little bit of a better option, and we'll look at that in a moment. But if I'm looking at the pricing, the Aero G at the moment compared to this ASUS Z690 Strix A D4 motherboard is a little bit cheaper. I mean, check out the latest pricing in the description below if you want to pick either of these up. But bear in mind, this is the Z690 version of this motherboard. There's also B660 version of this, which you're going to lose a little bit of connectivity through the chipset because the chipset isn't as powerful in terms of bandwidth and, you know, IO and so on, but it is much more affordable option. So let's have a look at this motherboard. I've taken the motherboard already out of the box, and what else you get with it is the manual that I have underneath over there. But inside the box there is a few other things that you might be interested in. We have a keyring, some literature, a card from the, you know, ROG guys, some more literature basically. We have a sheet full of stickers. We have a warranty card, DVD. I don't even know who would have a DVD or optical drive who would get this motherboard. Then on this side we have the Wi-Fi antenna. This is also magnetic, so you can actually stick it to your PC case or whatever is actually made of iron, so it would stick to it. 4 SATA cables. Then we have these little square standoff stickers for the M.2 slot. If your NVMe drive is only one-sided, like I have over here, as you can see, the NAND flash is only one side and you don't have anything underneath, I recommend you use these little standoffs that go underneath the M.2 slots that you can see on the motherboard in a moment. That will just help you to not bend your M.2. If you stick the heatsink on the top, this will just support it underneath. There's one and there's another like 3 there available for that, so 3 of these. Then we have 2 quick release screw heads or quick release kind of mounting fixtures that you already have on the motherboard, but these are just spares just in case you need them or they break on the motherboard. But they're very, very helpful or very DIY friendly to change your M.2 SSDs. And lastly, we have some zip ties. So if you are looking at the motherboard, one of the first things you see is the design, and it's white and kind of silver design. And this is where this motherboard is a little bit different, or a lot different than anything you can find out there, because there isn't that many white motherboards out there. Bear in mind, if you do want to build a white PC or 12th gen PC, check out my white PC build guide, where I'm going to talk about more about all of these kind of parts you can get for white PC. But this is one of them that is also DDR4. If you want to go DDR4 and white, well, there is literally not a lot of option. This Gigabyte board, but the Gigabyte board is more silver, not white. There's much more white features on this board. But if you're a creator and you want to build a white DDR4 board, then this is kind of the only and best option there for you. The B660 version is available as well. I wish it was more straight and less like kind of angles and stuff, but it will be more like minimalistic design. But basically we have the LGA 1700 socket here for the Intel's 12th gen, most likely 13th as well. There is 2 separate socket holes for this socket. So if you do have an older cooler from Intel's 11th gen, which was LGA's 1200 socket, then the holes are both there. So you can just use it. You don't need to like buy extra or request an extra bracket or mounting kit from your cooler manufacturer. which is very, very helpful to have, and you can use them no problem. There's going to be no like cooling advantage or difference if you're going to use the 1700 or 1200 socket differences, or mounting bracket differences. It's going to cool your CPU down exactly the same. And then we have 4 DDR4 slots, and these support up to 128 gigabytes, so 32 gigabytes per stick. Non-ECC memory, but it's all right, I guess. For these main prosumer kind of boards, we're gonna not go ECC. In terms of the headers, on the top you can see 2 8 EPS or CPU power headers there. Then we have some fan headers. As you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 all together, and they're all 1 ampere and 12 volt. And in terms of the fan curves, these two share the fan controls there, because one of them is CPU fan header optional, and then CPU fan header, which are here, and also this AIO pump header in here. This will always run 100% of the speed, so you don't have any fan curves. You can't do fan curves on there, but the rest of them have separate fan curves available in BIOS or in your fan curve software. Then moving on to the headers, we have this header here, which is voltage header, basically voltage overclocking. It's an overclocking feature whereby this little short, or this little, you can short the pins left and right or right and left, and then that will give you extra voltage to the CPU, which might be helpful for you as an overclocker. And then voltage kind of meter headers as well, if you want to measure the voltage externally. Then we have RGB headers. On the top we have one 5 volt and one 12 volt, and then on the bottom here we have 2 more 5 volt headers. Moving on, here we have the LED postcode kind of Aero code there. I'm loving this on ASUS very, very much. I like how the LED is a different color as well. When the CPU is red, then RAM is orange, then VGA is white, and then boot is green. So basically, if it goes through, it's kind of like a traffic lights. Once it goes green, it's going to go on boot and everything is fine. And I very much like these on ASUS boards. Very helpful to see what's the problem if you're not going to get a post. We have a 24 pin ATX power here. Then we have a front panel USB-C port, and this is 20 gigabits in speed, which is USB 3.2 Gen 2 X2 slot. That's a mouthful. Can we just call them USB-C and then just name the actual bandwidth that you can get from this? 20 gigabits in speed, there we go. Then we have a front panel USB 3 Type A header, and this is 5 gigabits in speed. Then we have 6 SATA ports here. Moving on the bottom, this is the front panel header. We have a TPM header on there, which you don't actually need because you have the TPM built into the CPU on the 12th gen, so I don't know why you would need that, or if you're gonna have to actually buy the TPM module separately if you want to use this as well. Anyway, random feature. I don't think 99.9% people don't use that. Then we have one sensor header in here, or temperature sensor. Interestingly, the motherboard didn't come any of the sensor or temperature prongs, but you can use them if you bought them separately. Then we have 2 USB 2.0 headers here for your AIO or some other things you might need for your motherboard. We have a Thunderbolt header here. So basically this motherboard doesn't have built-in or included Thunderbolt ports, but if you do want to buy a Thunderbolt expansion card separately to plug it in here, for example, then you can connect this to Thunderbolt header and get full Thunderbolt connectivity and so on. On top of these RGB white headers, we have SPDIF out port. So even though it doesn't have optical output on the back of the motherboard, if you do need that feature, you can expand it through this port there. And then lastly, we have a front panel audio header in there, and that covers the headers of the motherboard. Moving on to the PCIe slots here, you can see the top slot here is PCIe 16 slot. This is Gen 5 slot, so it does support upcoming GPUs and also backwards compatible to Gen 4 and Gen 3. Then we have PCIe Gen 3 X1 slot here for the expansion slot, and then on the bottom we have PCIe Gen 3 X16 slot, so it's a full size, but actually the pins end kind of here, so it is like 8 lanes here, not the full pin layout like you would have on the top slot. As you can see, the pins go all the way there, but our pins here on the bottom slot end there. Now interestingly, you might have noticed this little button over here, which is very, very helpful to release your GPU, or if you change your GPU or upgrade, or you want to get your GPU on and off. Let me show you this. So let's say we're going to plug in this beautiful white Strix in here that will just fit into this color theme beautifully. As you can see, this covers like most of the motherboard and goes white, and even though underneath the GPU there wasn't a lot of white covers, but as you can see now, a lot of the motherboard is just white covered, so it's absolutely beautiful. And then now, if you wanted to remove usually the graphics card, you would have to like get a big screwdriver or something like that, and then push down on this release button there to actually release the slot, and then you can get it out. But now what you can do is just press this button there, boom, that opens the slot, and then you can literally just boom, release your GPU, which is very, very helpful and DIY friendly, and I think all of the motherboards should have that. So Gigabyte, MSI, ASRock, take a leaf out of ASUS's book, okay? Let's have a look at the M.2 slots and the covers. Now, the amazing thing about this motherboard's M.2 heatsinks is that none of the screws actually come loose when you unscrew them. All the screws stick to the heatsinks, and they're all the same size in terms of the like Phillips. So it's a Phillips 1 screw head that you need to release these, but you're not going to lose the screws. Very DIY friendly, I like that a lot. As you can see, we have the thermal pads on all of these heat sinks, which is plenty to actually cool down your SSD. But the top slot actually has the thermal pad underneath as well, whereas all the other three only have it on the top. Now, when we're talking about the speeds of these M.2s, then all of them are PCIe Gen 4 X4 slots. Obviously, they're backwards compatible as well, but they can run at Gen 4 X4 speeds, and then you're not going to lose any of the other features on the motherboard. There's no switches there if you run NVMe SSDs on all of these slots. The top slot though does go through the CPU PCIe lanes, but the other three on the bottom here go through the chipset. The interesting quirk over here is if you have M.2 SATA SSD plugged in onto the fourth slot on the bottom here, then you're going to lose one of the SATA ports on the side there. But if you run NVMe M.2 SSD there, then you're not going to lose the SATA port, so just so you know. Bear in mind, this bottom or fourth slot is the only slot that supports SATA M.2 SSDs as well. The others don't support that. Also, if you have longer SSDs, longer than 2280 M.2s, then you're gonna have to plug them in either on the top there. As you can see, that's a little bit longer. So if you have a normal SSD there, that's a bit longer, and then this bottom third slot is longer as well. As you can see, the third and fourth slot are only up to 80 millimeters. The last awesome thing about these M.2 slots is that if you plug in your M.2 and then push it down, you don't need any screws or screw anything down. You just flick that little plastic kind of header, and then that holds your M.2 down. If you're wondering what are these black little rubber heads there, these squares, then those little stickers that we got on the motherboard, you should stick like the little square sticker down in here from the box if you have NAND flash only one side of the SSD. For example, I have this M.2 here. As you can see, only the NAND is only on the top, but nothing on the bottom. Bottom is just flat. Then you'll put the sticker there, and that's going to hold or support the bottom of the M.2. So when you put the heatsink down, it's not going to bend your M.2. But if you do have NAND on the bottom as well, then don't worry about that. Look at that. They've made a really long heatsink for the top M.2 SSD so that you can get like better cooling mass of the heatsink, but also drilled holes in here so you can still screw in the actual motherboard without removing the heatsink cover. Let's have a look at the I/O of the motherboard. On the top we have HDMI and display out ports, so to use for the iGPU of your Intel CPU. Then we have two USB type A ports, and these are 2.0 speeds, and this is also the BIOS type A port. Basically, if you want to update your motherboard's BIOS without the CPU or RAM, then you just plug it in there, make sure it's connected to the power and so on, hit that BIOS flashback button, and it's actually gonna just update your BIOS from this USB port, which is very, very helpful. You also have a clear CMOS button there if you need that. Then 4 USB type A ports, and these are 5 gigabits in speed. We have 1 USB type C header. This is also 20 gigabits in speed. So you have one on the front panel and then one on the back panel, both of them 20 gigabits in speed, which is absolutely amazing. We have 2 type A ports here, which are 10 gigabits in speed, 2.5 gigabit LAN which is very helpful for creators. If you do run like a 2.5 gig NAS or some kind of network connection, then this is a very helpful port to have on the motherboard. 1 gigabit would be kind of not fast enough, but 2.5G you can actually edit off your NAS. Then we have a Wi-Fi antennas and also Bluetooth antennas. We have another Type-C port on the bottom there, and this is 10 gigabits in speed. And then we have the rear audio inputs and outputs, 3.5mm ones. So then, in conclusion, what do I think about this motherboard? I think this is a very interesting option because it's DDR4 and white, and there isn't a lot of option out there. Now, there's a lot of DIY friendliness with this board, and as a creator, I enjoy this a lot. And not too much of like overclocking features that you pay extra for as a creator, but still it's a little bit more expensive than the Aero G. Now, I think depending if you need the video output through USB-C, then the Gigabyte board probably is a better option. But if you need just the fastest ports and DDR4, then this is a better board. Also, this board is more white themed than the Gigabyte board. The Gigabyte board is more gray themed or silver themed. This is more white. And as you can see, there's a big chunk of like kind of design missing, or you think, oh, but this is going to be shown on in my PC to see a big black spot. Actually, if you have a GPU and you plug the GPU in, that covers just all of this, and all you see is just white and silver, which is very, very nice. So this is the main competitor to the Gigabyte Aero G D4 motherboard, or DDR4 motherboard. This is D4. This Z690 Strix is the better or best competitor to that, which I think is very, very interesting if you want to be on a budget and get like kind of a cheap DDR4 RAM, and you don't want to get the expensive DDR5 yet, and you want to have like 128 gigabytes or something like that. It's much more affordable on the DDR4 platform. So if you do want to pick up this motherboard, then check it out in the description below, and you can find the latest pricing in there as well. I'm going to leave the B660 version there as well, which has a little bit of less, you know, connectivity, less like, you know, back panel ports and USB ports and so on. If you need to connect a lot of things, you might want to go with a Z690. But if you just want the, you know, 12th gen and then the connectivity, then the B660 is a very affordable option as well with the white theme, so definitely worth checking them out. So you as a creator, let me know what you think about this design. Is this too gamery, or will we give it a pass fitting into the greater theme? I think I'm like 50-50. I see a lot of stuff going on. I wish it was more minimal, but let me know what you think. So then, likes and subs, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.